Good evening. Olentangy Schools is looking forward to opening our 16th elementary school in August 2021. Having another great new elementary school in our district brings the need to adjust attendance boundaries to fill that school. Continued rapid growth across Olentangy has also created the need for attendance boundaries to be adjusted across several elementary buildings and middle schools. As superintendent, I am charged with two major responsibilities: to assign staff and assign students to buildings. As such, the Superintendent's Committee has been formed, comprised of 14 community members who have spent the past 3 months examining our current attendance boundaries, feeder patterns, and enrollment projections. This committee also works closely with our partner, Cooperative Strategies, who provides our enrollment projections, creates planning units, and GIS mapping tools. The committee has developed several options, which will be presented to you momentarily for your feedback. This Superintendent's Committee will review all feedback and ultimately provide a recommendation to me to make a final decision on new attendance boundaries. My decision will be shared at the Thursday, March 25th Board of Education meeting. Overall, I anticipate a relatively small number of students to be moved during this year's redistricting efforts. And as we look ahead to the opening of middle school 6 and elementary 17 in the next 2 to 3 years, a need will be created to have a much more extensive redistricting plan. One of the great things about living and attending school in our district is that everyone loves the school they now attend. Our building cultures are outstanding, and no one wants to leave to attend another school. This makes decisions like this incredibly difficult because I know I'm moving students and not numbers. I encourage you to look at the bigger picture of balancing enrollment, easing overcrowding, and opening a new building. I know this will be hard for those impacted. I understand and empathize. However, I am confident that for anyone moving to a new school or to the new elementary school, that a great experience awaits them. Now I'd like to turn it over to Scott Leopold from Cooperative Strategies to provide an overview of the 10 options for your feedback. Please take time after viewing this presentation to complete the feedback surveys. If after viewing this presentation you have unanswered questions, please feel free to sign up for a designated question and answer session on Saturday, February 20th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'm Scott Leopold with Cooperative Strategies, and I will be providing an overview of the redistricting process and will present a series of options to collect your feedback. As a reminder, at this point, no decisions have been made, and these options are being presented to generate feedback and conversation. This graphic outlines the overall process. As you can see, we began by establishing an advisory committee, which was charged with keeping an objective view and considering the needs of all students. This committee is composed of parent volunteers, and district staff members participated as a resource. The committee reviewed the redistricting guidelines from the board, the overall process, and the underlying data such as enrollment and capacity. The committee then worked to develop a series of options, which you will see in this presentation. Now we are at the point where we're ready to collect feedback. This will include both an interactive online survey as well as opportunities for virtual live Q&A sessions with the staff, consultants, and the committee members. The committee will review all feedback from the community and develop a recommendation to the superintendent. These are the redistricting guidelines that we used for this process. The resolution can be found in its entirety on the district website. The major points are that each building should be optimally utilized. Once determined and after consideration of projected enrollment, attendance boundaries should remain intact as much as possible. Safety, convenience, and efficiency of transportation as well as student travel times should be considered in assigning students to buildings. And also alignment of elementary, middle, and high school attendance areas should be a factor in establishing attendance areas as much as possible. We spent a lot of time talking about the second bullet point. This is particularly relevant because, as you know, we're opening a new elementary school this fall, in the fall of 2021. But in the next 2 to 3 years, we have an additional middle school and possibly an additional elementary school coming online as well. So the committee had to consider boundary change implications over time, knowing that some of them may be temporary. This slide just shows our history of facilities and when they opened up, and you can just see that, as we all know, Olentangy is a fast-growing district, and we opened a lot of schools over the last 30 years. This slide shows us our current boundaries and associated data. The data points that we worked with quite a bit or capacity, and this is the number of students that a facility can hold. And we have accounted for dedicated pre-K spaces in each building and are not including that in our capacity number. And so here you can see our capacity numbers in the chart. Our next figure that we're looking at is enrollment. This is the number of students in each building. Again, we have queried out the pre-K students so that we're only looking at the students that correlate to the capacity that we're looking at. These numbers are based on the 2020-21 student enrollment information, and the committee took into account fluctuations due to the pandemic as well as future growth. And so this shows us our enrollment for each school based on the current boundaries. And this does include live-in enrollment, so it does not include transfers between buildings. And finally, utilization shown over here. This is simply enrollment divided by capacity, which gives us that percentage. And so you can see on average, if we include the capacity from the new elementary school, we're at 90% utilization. And so we do show the need for that building. Overall, with that new school coming online, we're at 90%. Looking at the map over here, you can see we've got some overutilization currently at Cheshire and Johnny Cake Elementary Schools, as well as Heritage and Olentangy Meadows. We've got a little bit of underutilization at Alum Creek Elementary. If we look over to the western portion of the district, you can see that we're pretty good as far as overall utilization. We see a lot of the schools in the green. If we look at middle schools, we see a little overutilization at both Orange Middle School and Berkshire Middle School. Berkshire Middle School is more of a focus because there's more growth pointed at Berkshire. Changes to Orange, that's something that we could perhaps revisit in a future process when we're talking about the next middle school coming online as well. When we look at the high school utilization over here, just keep in mind we're using that 1,800 number as the capacity. Right now, we're in pretty decent shape as far as utilization goes at the high school level, but we may look at balancing that utilization over the next 2 to 3 years when we again look at boundaries associated with the opening of the new middle school 6. Now, before we go into the options, I just want to reiterate the goals for this process. We're establishing a boundary for the next elementary school, which will open in the fall of 2021. We're always considering the guidelines from the board. The options that we're looking at are intended to foster conversation and discussion among community members. We need to remember that we're always thinking about the future growth and its impacts on enrollment, capacity, and utilization. As you've probably noticed already, we have split the options into really 3 different categories. We're looking at the North Elementary options, which include Cheshire, Johnny Cake Corners, Heritage, Arrowhead, and the new elementary school. We're treating them separate from the South options, which include Alum Creek, Freedom Trail, Glen Oak, Oak Creek, Olentangy Meadows, and Walnut Creek, because they're pretty much independent as far as those changes go. Any of the North options that we're showing will work with any of the South options that we're showing, and we just thought it was simpler to break those 2 up. We're not looking at any changes to the boundaries for elementary schools on the western side of the district, west of Olentangy River /315. Middle school concepts are only for the northern region, looking at Shanahan, Hyatts, and Berkshire. We don't have any middle school changes proposed for the southern region of the district. Finally, I just want to reiterate one more time before we go into the options that at this point, no decisions have been made. There's no priority of options. There's no preferred option. The order in which they're presented does not matter. These options are truly intended to just foster conversation and feedback from the community. Okay, so now looking at middle school concepts, and we are calling them concepts because of how they relate to the elementary options in this area. And just as a reminder, for middle schools, we're only talking about Hyatts, Shanahan, and Berkshire. Orange and Liberty are completely unchanged in any of these options. As you're looking at perhaps the school locator that we have to find out if you're impacted in each option, we're not showing any locations for the middle school concepts, so you have to kind of look at what the elementary schools look like and how you're impacted on the elementary options, and then think about the feeder patterns and these maps that you see on this screen to get an idea of what the impact might be on the middle school options. If you remember, the driving force for this was the overutilization that we had at Berkshire. And so moving right into concept 1, our highlights are Arrowhead would split between Berkshire and Shanahan, just like it is today. The new elementary school would split between Shanahan, and so this area would move from Berkshire to Shanahan. And then the area over here, which is currently zoned to Cheshire, would move to elementary 16 in this underlying option, and it would continue to feed to Hyatt. So there's no change there in that option. Cheshire and Johnny Cake would continue to feed to Berkshire 100%. Our benefits here, Berkshire is under 100% utilized, not by much, but it is under 100%. Our challenges are feeder pattern splits at both the new elementary school and Arrowhead. And then we know because of that utilization is at 99%, we'll have to have additional relief when we have middle school 6 built. But remember that these changes that we're looking at would really only be effective for 2 years until we get that new process going for the boundaries associated with middle school 6. And so you can see how these feeder patterns look in this concept as well. But just as a reminder, these are concepts, and a lot of it has to do with how they overlay with those elementary concepts. And if we wanted to take each of these concepts in combination with all of the elementary options that we came up with, we'd end up with 12 different combinations. So we're asking you to kind of look at these conceptually, and again, think about those feeder pattern implications and what that utilization looks like at each of the schools. Here's middle school concept 2. Our highlights here, elementary 16 would split between Shanahan and Hyatt's. It's a different area because we're looking at this concept over an option that has Olentangy Falls and Olentangy Crossing going to elementary 16. And so we would have that split potentially here in that situation. We would also have a split at Cheshire if we look at this concept over this option. But really think about those concepts as far as the feeder pattern splits. Do we want to have elementary 16 split, or do we want to try to have it going to one school? Remembering that this is only going to be a 2-year situation. Looking at Arrowhead would feed 100% into Shanahan, and so this whole area would be Shanahan. But again, it's more of a temporary solution. Our benefits here, Berkshire has some available space to take on projected growth. We get Berkshire down to 86% because we take so much of this area into Shanahan. Shanahan's at 96, but it can handle that. It can handle that area. Again, a 2-year situation. We would have more Shanahan students that would go to Berlin in this particular option, and I think that will compare to some of our later concepts that we're looking at. But you can kind of see we'd have a larger area. The split for between Berlin and Olentangy is right there at that Hollenbach Road line, and so this would just have a larger share of Shanahan kids going into Berlin. Our challenges, of course, are those feeder splits at both Cheshire and elementary 16 here. Okay, now moving on to our middle school concept 3. Our highlights, Arrowhead would again split between Shanahan and Berkshire. In this option, elementary 16 would feed 100% into Hyatt's. Heritage would feed 100% into Shanahan. And so the only split that we would really have here is the existing split that we have at Arrowhead. And so the only change that we're looking at is this area that is right around the new elementary 16. Our benefits, again, we get Berkshire down below 100%, but not by much. Our challenges, we do have that feeder split at Arrowhead. We're going to have that additional relief when middle school 6 is built for Berkshire. Looking at our feeders, you can see Arrowhead is the only split in this one. Here's our middle school concept 4. Our highlights here are that both Arrowhead and Heritage would feed 100% into Shanahan. Elementary 16 would feed 100% into Hyatt's, and so this is a perfect feeder pattern option for these schools. Our benefits, 100% feeders into the middle schools. We have some room available in Berkshire to take on that projected growth. We're at 90% there, 92% at Shanahan. Our challenges is that this option only works with the elementary options that we're looking at that do not make major changes to heritage. And so if we want to have these nice clean feeder patterns, we can't use any of the elementary options that move Olentangy Falls and Olentangy Crossing into elementary 16. But here you can see how all these feeder patterns look. But again, I just wanted to reiterate that we're looking at these middle school concepts really conceptually, and it will really be the role of the committee to kind of interpret the feedback from the community about what you feel about these options, and then apply it on top of the elementary options that we're looking at as well. That concludes our options and concepts presentation. Now I'll go into talking about the next steps and collecting your feedback. We'll have this online survey open through Sunday, February 28th. And just as a reminder, this is really about feedback. It's not about voting or anything like that. It's really sharing your comments and feedback so that the committee can consider them as they develop a recommendation. We'll have an opportunity to participate in an online Q&A sessions on Saturday, February 20th. Those will be at noon, where we'll discuss the North Region elementary options. At 1 o'clock, we'll discuss the South Region options. And at 2, we'll look at those middle school concepts. And again, the committee will review your feedback and make a recommendation to the superintendent. There will be a video announcement on this process and the recommendations on March 26th. Thank you for taking the time to go through this with us.